Hello everyone, Comrade Murray here. Today I'm going to be making a video about the Jehovah's Witnesses, also known as the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society. The Watchtower Bible and Tract Society, also known as the Jehovah's Witnesses, is a fundamentalist Christian restorationist denomination with origins tracing back to the 1870s. They are widely recognized as being a cult and having a membership around the world with numbers in the millions. Just like the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, or the Mormons as they are often compared to, the Jehovah's Witnesses are known for knocking on your door or standing in public proselytizing their literature. As with all cults from an outside-in view, they may seem good and ideal, and this is exactly the facade that these groups put up. Being materialists, we recognize that the concept of God is metaphysical, and Lenin identified the various ways the Orthodox Church in Russia was spiritually oppressing the people. The same can be said for the Jehovah's Witnesses. The structure of their organization is like that of a non-profit corporation, luring in the exploited with false promises of paradise and siphoning money from them, all while imposing strict and oppressive regulations of them. In this video, I'd like to analyze something that's kind of personal for me in the development of the Watchtower Society from a dialectical standpoint. Observe the various ways the society upholds bourgeois class rule and other religious cults like them, and how they should be dealt with by the modern revolutionary movement and during socialist transition. The Watchtower Society's origins can be traced back to 1844 with the Millerites movement. The Millerites were led by William Miller, who was famous for being a fundamentalist upholder of Bible doctrine and a fervent believer that the world would soon come to an end. By assembling a complicated set of dates and looking for quote-unquote clues in the Bible, he arrived at the conclusion that the end of this system would come in October of 1844. This is a bourgeois pseudoscience known as Bible codology, and it purports that in the Bible there are hidden codes, dates, and messages that can be strung together to give important information, most notably when the rapture or Armageddon would come. All of this is important because it explains the long history the Watchtower Society has with failed predictions, and Bible codology is their main method. Accounts tell of Millerites selling off all their belongings in preparation for the end, so one can imagine the devastating economic effects that this had. In fact, the failure of this prediction was known as the Great Disappointment. William Miller died in 1849, but his movement certainly did not. The movement split off in several directions, but the sect that I will focus on today is the Adventist Church, which is still around today, and future Watchtower founder Charles Taze Russell was a part of. The main belief of the Adventists is that William Miller's prediction in 1844 was incorrect, and that the coming of Christ and Armageddon is still on the horizon. Nelson H. Barber was a prominent member who was close with the leader and became close associates with Russell in 1875. When Russell invited him to Pennsylvania to speak about his message after reading a copy of Herald of the Morning, an Adventist newspaper, in 1879 they came into conflict over conflicting views regarding how people would be saved from death and brought to salvation, and Russell ceased his relations with Barber. This contradiction between Barber and Russell resulted in the formation of a new movement, the Bible Student Movement. Russell continued to develop his Bible chronology using Bible code. He had deduced that in 1874 Christ returned symbolically, and in 1878 he was crowned King of Heaven. Russell denounced mainstream Christian sects such as the Catholic Church for pagan beliefs, like the Trinity. He held that God's final judgment of unfaithful Christendom would happen in 1878, and when that failed, he applied more Bible code and said that 1878 corresponded with the fall of Babylon in the Bible, and that the end of the harvest, or Armageddon, would come in 1914. In 1881, Zion's Watchtower Tract Society was formed as an unincorporated agency for disseminating propaganda for Russell's movement, and in 1884 he officially consolidated his power and became president once the agency was legally incorporated. The pace of the movement was rapidly growing. Branches were established in places such as Switzerland, Germany, and the United Kingdom, and in 1909 the headquarters was moved to Brooklyn, New York, where it would reside until 2016. Russell in 1910 consolidated the international movement of congregations under one name, that being the International Bible Students Association. In 1914, he debuted The Photodrama of Creation, a color image slideshow detailing God's plans for humanity. Despite the seemingly unmatched popularity and growth, there were still several schisms in Russell's movement. In 1905, Paul S.L. Johnson, one of the traveling pilgrim speakers and a former Lutheran minister, pointed out to Russell that his doctrines on the New Covenant had undergone a complete reversal. Until 1880, Russell had claimed the New Covenant would be inaugurated only after the last of the 144,000 anointed Christians were taken to heaven. But since 1881, he had written that it was already in force. Russell reconsidered the question, and in January 1907, wrote several Watchtower articles reaffirming his 1880 position, that the New Covenant belongs exclusively to the coming age, adding that the Church had no mediator, but that Christ was the advocate. He also taught that Christians making up the 144,000 would join Christ as a joint heir and assistant mediator during the millennium being the time period where Christ rules in heaven on paradise earth. This belief is retained by Jehovah's Witnesses to this day. On October 24, 1909, former Watchtower Society Secretary-Treasurer Ernest C. Hennings, who was then the Australian branch minister based in Melbourne, wrote Russell an open letter of protest trying to persuade him to abandon the teaching and calling the Bible students to examine its legitimacy. When Russell refused, Hennings and most of the Melbourne congregation left Russell's movement to form the New Covenant Fellowship. Hundreds of estimated 10,000 U.S. Bible students also left, including Pilgrim Matthew L. McPhail and member of the Chicago Bible Students, and A.E. Williamson of Brooklyn, forming the New Covenant Believers. The group, which formerly referred to the members of Free Bible Students, published the Kingdom Scribe magazine until 1975. The group is currently known as the Berean Bible Students Church, with fewer than 200 members. Another split would occur regarding a leadership dispute from Russell's death on October 31, 1916. On January 6, 1917, Bible Students Church and former Bible Students Church member and now Society Legal Counsel Joseph Franklin Rutherford was elected president, unopposed at the Pittsburgh Convention. Rutherford then announced publication of the Finished Mystery, which he claimed was a posthumous volume of Russell's studies in the Scriptures. Bylaws passed by both the Pittsburgh Convention and the Board of Directors stated that the president would be the executive officer and general manager of the society, giving him full charge of its affairs worldwide. By June, 4 of the 7 Watchtower Society directors, Robert H. Hirsch, Alfred I. Ritchie, Isaac F. Hoskins, and James D. Wright, had decided they had erred in endorsing Rutherford's expansion of powers, claiming Rutherford had become autocratic. In June, Hirsch attempted to rescind the new bylaws and to reclaim powers of management from Rutherford, but Rutherford later claimed he had detected a conspiracy among the directors to seize control of the society. In July, Rutherford gained a legal opinion from a Philadelphia corporation lawyer that the 4 were not legally directors of the society. On July 12th, Rutherford filled what he claimed were 4 vacancies on the board, appointing Alexander H. McMillan, Pennsylvania Bible student W.E. Spill, John A. Bonnet, and George H. Fisher as directors. Between August and November, the society and the 4 ousted directors published a series of pamphlets, with each side accusing the other of ambitious and disruptive behavior. The former directors also claimed Rutherford had forced out anyone at the headquarters to sign a petition and threatened dismissal to those who didn't. Police forcibly escorted the former directors from their Brooklyn headquarters on August 8th. On January 5, 1918, Rutherford was returned to office. Rutherford rectified Russell's teachings about the end coming in 1914 and made the claim that Satan was cast down on earth in 1914. And this is justified because 1914 marked the beginning of the Great World Conflict, known as World War I. Over the years, many would leave the movement in protest of Rutherford's coup of the organization. This resulted in countless tiny splinter groups and congregations under the name Bible Students. So to reduce confusion, on July 26, 1931, at a convention in Columbus, Ohio, Rutherford announced the name of the organization would be changed to the Jehovah's Witnesses. Likely the most important and central belief employed by the organizations influencing the masses is that of Armageddon and paradise on earth. The belief that our time here on earth is soon coming to an end is not unique to Jehovah's Witnesses. Almost all religions have a variation of this teaching. It is the belief that the masses should not strive to win a better world for themselves here on earth, but rather wait and hope for God to save them. The 144,000 belief of Jehovah's Witnesses ties into this. According to doctrine, since Jesus left earth, there have always been 144,000 anointed people on earth, and when the paradise earth comes, those people will rule in heaven with God. As for the rest of humanity, their task is to spread Jehovah's message so that people can be baptized. This is crucial because any person who is not a believer will not survive Armageddon. This suggests that God will commit the greatest mass murder in human history against all non-believers on this earth. There have been many predictions as to when Armageddon will arrive, but as of 2020, the current doctrine is very complicated. Basically, Armageddon will come before every person who personally knew an anointed person alive in 1914 has died. This doctrine is hesitant to place an exact date on the event, but provides a general time frame of somewhere within the next 25 to 30 years or so. The year 1914 is quite central to organizational beliefs. Currently, it is believed that in 1914 Satan was cast out of heaven, and that is the reason that the 20th and 21st century have been so particularly destructive and filled with suffering, and that date is found through Bible code. It supposedly corresponds with the fall of Babylon, which they say took place in 607 BC. But all modern archaeology and canon points to the 539 BCE as being the date this happened, eroding the beliefs of the organization since it is all based around that 1914 date. Unlike other Christian denominations, communion is a real yearly event for Jehovah's Witnesses, rather than a weekly event. This is perhaps the most important day of the year for believers, known as the Memorial, or as others may know it, the Passover. Believers will attend their congregations and listen to a talk from an elder regarding the Passover. They will pass plates of unleavened bread, which represents Jesus' body, and red wine, which represents Jesus' blood. No one eats or drinks for them unless they are anointed, which is something God decides and tells you in a dream or some other way, and not something you can choose. Lastly, there is the belief of the faithful and discreet slave. This refers to the governing body, a group of 8 men who are the de facto leaders. Although they dislike being referred to as such, all literature produced by the organization starts with them. They choose the topics to cover, what to write, and it goes down the hierarchy and is edited and printed. All decisions surrounding property are made from them as well. So in practice, they are capitalists who extract profit. Legally, the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society are 2 different corporations. The Watchtower Society owns and manages all the organization's property, and as previously mentioned, are responsible for the distribution of literature. Almost every country around the world has a branch office, which is usually where all the activity within that country is coordinated, and literature is printed. These branches are known as Bethels, and the people who work there are Bethelites. Bethelites live and work on the compound, and all their subsistence is provided, and they work for no money. It is purely volunteer work. This is perhaps most evident in showing how the organization has embedded itself in the capitalist NGO complex. Unlike other churches which impose tithes, the Jehovah's Witnesses are funded completely through voluntary donations of their members. However, members are aggressively encouraged to donate. Siphoning money from its majority working class and petty bourgeois membership, the Watchtower Society is an imperialist multinational corporation extracting massive profits from abroad. For purposes of the ministry, each country is divided into regions, and the regions into circuits. Annually, Jehovah's Witnesses attend a circuit assembly, an all-day event with several sermons surrounding a given theme, and also a regional convention, which is a larger 3-day event attended by all congregations in that region. On a congregational level, each congregation is overseen by a body of elders. The governing body, which resides at the world headquarters in New York, is at the top of the hierarchy, and while they do not directly claim to be heavenly inspired by God, it is implied they are, since all literature comes from them, and they say they are providing God's spiritual food. They do not like to be referred to as leaders, rather they say Jehovah, which is a Romanized version of God's Hebrew name, is the leader. But, as previously shown, principally, they are leaders in everything but name. As has been previously seen, the Jehovah's Witnesses are home to numerous unfulfilled predictions for the end of the world. It is to be expected since the organization has descended from the Millerite movement, famous for their great disappointment of 1844. To truly understand the magnitude of the organization's lies and blatant misleading of the masses, we must go back to Russell's split with Barber and Russell's first prediction in 1880. Russell wrote that by 1880 all the signs of the end were said to have started. Great earthquakes, war, pestilence, and behavior of people, and so forth. The next prophesied date was 1881. Once again, it was believed that the remaining of the 144,000 would be taken by a rapture straight to heaven. In January 1881, the Watchtower stated that the translation or change from the natural to the spiritual condition is due this side or by the fall of our year 1881. As early as 1892, Russell was predicting a great war for Europe and said this would happen in 1906. This prophecy was considered fulfilled when the Russo-Japanese War started in 1906, although this is a stretch since the imperialist conflict primarily took place in Asia. 1910 was another predicted date when the Bible students would be raptured to heaven. This was based on measurements of the pyramids of Giza. In a Watchtower publication known as Studies in the Scriptures, Volume 3, Thy Kingdom Come, it stated, "But a trouble chiefly upon the church may be expected about 1910 AD. The 4 years from the 1910 to the end of 1914 indicated thus, and the Great Pyramid will doubtless be a time of fiery trial upon the church. 1914 remains a pivotal date to Watchtower beliefs, but previously it was thought to once again be the date that the end would come. Now it is known as the beginning of the end, so to speak, and the year when Jesus began ruling in heaven." In a blatant revision of their own history, governing body member Samuel Hurd, in a 2016 documentary about the organization, claims that at the kingdom's birth in 1914, the Bible students were not exactly sure what was going to happen, but they knew it would be a pivotal year. This is absolutely false. Before 1914, the Bible students were putting out concrete predictions for what would transpire in 1914, such as it being when false religion would come to the end, the year when God's people would be delivered, and when God would strike vengeance on non-believers. In 1912, Russell explained that he did not know how to account for the year zero between BC and AD, so this meant that the end could take place in either 1914 or 1915. When 1914 failed, Russell used this as an excuse and placed his hope in 1915. The common pattern of the Watchtower is to introduce a date and then a later date to rectify it, and then repeat that process. A noteworthy example is the sealing of the 144,000. The date constantly changed. Russell originally set it as being 1878. This was moved to 1881, 1910, 1914, 1925, 1931, and finally 1935. In 2007, it was admitted as unknown. In his final years, Rutherford was adamant that the end was about to come, never placing an exact year, and wrote in 1941 about why marriage and childbirth should be put off until after Armageddon. The Jerusalem was destroyed in 70 AD, 37 years after Jesus' death. In 1950, Watchtower articles made the comparison to this. In 1951, it was stated that we are 37 years into the time of the end of Satan's world, hinting that it could be the end of the world. In 1952, the doctrine was scrapped in favor of a new one called generations. This teaching stated that the end would come before anyone alive during 1914 passes away. This teaching has gone through numerous revisions as well. From 1966 to 1975, the organization heavily implied the end would come in 1975, since 1975 supposedly marked the 6,000th year of humans' existence on Earth. During those years, the organization made regular references to 1975 being the end, such as several Watchtower articles. In 1967, at a regional convention, witnesses were told to stay alive until 75. And in November 1968, District Overseer Duggan announced at the Pampa, Texas Assembly that not really a full 83 months remain. So let's be faithful, and we will be alive beyond the War of Armageddon, which therefore slated Armageddon for October 1975. From 1966 to 1975, there was a tremendous growth in the organization because of the fervor surrounding the date. 1986 was the United Nations Year of Peace, an exciting call for Jehovah's Witnesses, since it is the belief of the Jehovah's Witnesses that calls for peace and security by the UN would directly precede the Great Tribulation, which is the period of intense persecution before Armageddon. A quote from a 1986 publication, True Peace and Security, How Can You Find It?, said, "The world's leaders know that a nuclear war means virtual extinction. Also, critical problems such as pollution, the population explosion, and domestic problems demand attention and money, so they want to relax the strained international relations. And evidence of this is in the proclamation by the United Nations of 1986 as the International Year of Peace and Security. This is no doubt is a step towards the fulfillment of Paul's above-quoted words. It was also implied in several Watchtower articles that Armageddon would come before the year 2000. The October 1980 Watchtower stated, and if the wicked system of this world survived until the turn of the century, which is highly improbable, in view of the world trends and the fulfillment of Bible prophecy, there will still be survivors of the World War I generation. It is sad to see how the organization for over 100 years continues to lie to its followers. The governing body continually invent new reasonings to deflect the failure of their metaphysical world outlook. The oppression of the Watchtower is most certainly a product of the economic base. The ruling class have an interest in leading the masses away from revolution with grand promises of religious salvation. These promises, however, hold no grounds in reality and further disenfranchise the exploited people. In recent years, the Watchtower Society has gained notoriety for a growing problem of sexual abuse within the organization. This is due to a Bible-based policy known as the two-witness rule. The two-witness rule states that for a person to be found guilty of a wrongdoing, there must be two witnesses present, and they must give a confession. This presents a problem in situations of child abuse because sexual abuses are most often performed in private. The only way a second witness can be produced is if the abuser victimized another person and both victims reported it. The one report would not be enough. Congregation elders are also discouraged from contacting proper authorities and encouraged to first attempt to handle it within the organization, so as to not bring reproach on Jehovah's name, so to speak. In 2015, the Australian Royal Commission into Institutional Responses to Child Sex Abuse deduced that the internal policies of the organization are responsible for the large amount of abusers within. At the world headquarters, there is a database of all known abusers within the organization which date back to the 1950s. The organization has refused to hand this list over, and it has been fined $4,000 for every day they refuse to hand it over since 2016. Since 2010, there have been several notable high-profile cases brought against the Watchtower, such as that of Candace Conti, awarded $7 million, and Jose Lopez, awarded $13,500,000. The organization also abuses its members emotionally through the practice of disfellowshipping. The organization's way of handling punishment: a baptized member can be disfellowshipped for apostasy, sex before marriage, smoking, homosexuality, or anything considered a sin by the organization. The disfellowshipped person is not allowed to speak to any members within their religion, including their family, except under certain circumstances. It is a tactic of emotional blackmail to keep members dependent on the organization. A member deciding to leave would lose contact with everyone they knew within the church. Isolation has a profound effect on people, considering that humans are social beings, and these practices are crimes against the people. There are some present questions that remain on this topic. What should the attitude of the communist movement today be towards the Jehovah's Witnesses and other groups like them, such as the Mormons, Scientologists, or Seventh-day Adventists? How should these groups be dealt with in the socialist transition? It is clear that we can distinguish groups from other mainstream religions, such as the Catholic Church, due to their size and extremity of beliefs. However, revolutionaries should not disparage or shame current members for their beliefs. Many are exploited and oppressed workers, disenfranchised by the bleak state of capitalist society, and are pulled in with promises of salvation and a better world. As Lenin states in The Attitude of the Workers' Party to Religion, at the same time, Engels frequently condemned the efforts of the people who desired to be more left or more revolutionary than the Social Democrats, to introduce into the program of the Workers' Party an explicit proclamation of atheism, in the sense of declaring war on religion. Engels called a declaration of war was the best way to revive interest in religion, and to prevent it from really dying out. Likewise, it would be unwise for communists today to declare war on Jehovah's Witnesses and groups like it. Lenin rightly recognizes that struggling with the masses is the only way to pull them out of spiritual oppression and into a revolutionary consciousness. There is no doubt there exists a contradiction between the Jehovah's Witnesses and the development of socialism. In socialist society, a struggle of ideology should be waged against the organization, and they should be driven into obscurity with fines for their crimes. The mistake of the USSR was directly outlawing the Jehovah's Witnesses and attacking members directly, thereby increasing the fervor of believers, driving them underground and making it much more difficult to extinguish them. On the other hand, we should not play up the religious workers and compromise our principles as communists. If the masses identify that the Watchtower Society is committing crimes against the people, then the masses should be permitted to struggle against the society. Thus, the mass line should be applied to the question of cults like Jehovah's Witnesses in the transition to social society and in our current time. It is of utmost importance that the workers who are trapped within the yoke of the oppressive Watchtower Society and other cults like it be liberated from their spiritual chains and given the true hope of winning a better world for themselves. That is all for today, everyone. Thank you for watching. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you have any comments or criticisms, make sure to you can contact me on Discord, and I will make sure to listen to them. And with that, I will see you guys next time. Goodbye.